Y'all, the world's first raid has finally been beaten, and you know what that means? It's time for an honest review. I'm gonna be talking about the raid gear, the effects it's gonna have on the game, what I like about the template, what I find frustrating. Very immediately, I wanted to start with the looks. All right, man, I'm gonna be honest, compared to the previous raid, which looked like dookie butter, this gear actually looks really cool. I can tell that they actually put a lot of work into it, and honestly, the little meteors going around, the little effects on the wand, and the horns on the hat, this stuff is really cool, man. And honestly, I hope they keep going further and further every time they do a raid with throwing out stuff that we can use that doesn't really give us any sort of advantage other than looking like we're dripping. In the future, I hope they add mounts. I hope they add, like, you know, houses that could drop from, like, you know, like a raid. But I would argue if you're gonna do the raid just once, just to get the gear, you could do it simply for cosmetic reasons. And honestly, that's really cool that that's another incentive that exists now that didn't before. As far as the gear itself, I still don't have all of it, so, you know, keep that in mind. But y'all, this is a really balanced set. It gives you shads, and it also gives you accuracy, damage, pierce, everything that the Aeon gear gives, except for pip chance. So while the Burrower gear gives shad chance, and then everything except accuracy, the Shabalba gear that you get from this raid, it gives everything but pip chance. What you might notice, though, is that the Shabalba gear is actually a slightly more offensive version of the Burrower gear. So for some schools, you really, if you're using like a Burrower hat or Burrower boots, you might want to consider replacing it with Shabalba gear for one of many reasons. One, because of the Skyfarer ring existing, you have an honest option that any school can use. Like, this is like literally, look at this, look at the difference, right? I give up a small bit of HP and 1 death damage, and I get 4 pip chance in return. Because the Skyfarer ring exists, you're gonna want to run one piece of Shabalba gear with the Skyfarer ring, and yeah, you won't hit 100% pip chance, but you'll get so close, and you won't give up any extra stats, right? You won't have to, like, you know, replace a triangle jewel into a pip slot. You won't have to remake a pet in order to put pip chance on it. I think it's much easier to actually gain back pip chance with other pieces of gear than accuracy, which is a really cool concept. Now, you might have noticed, I mentioned you might want to run the hat, you might want to run the boots. What about the robe? I think the robe is some butt cheeks. I don't really know why it's so bad. I think it's like the resist and the damage feel really low. I'll give them this. The health does seem to be really high, but honestly, you give up the most pip chance on the robe compared to any other piece, and you're never going to be able to run every piece of Shabalba gear. So I guess if you're going to give up pip chance, I think the robe is the worst one to do. It looks the coolest, but it also is the dookiest. As far as the boots go, I would argue that the boots are actually probably one of the best drops from the entire raid. And there's a reason I say this. This is currently the only pair of boots in the game that gives you both 2 sword pins and shad chance. It's just not a thing that exists anywhere else. The only exception to this is the Skyfarer, but you might notice that boots give a lot of block. Most schools cannot just give up the hundreds of block that the Skyfarer boots drop. So this is actually a well-rounded set. So if you want to dual school by adding sword pins, this is by far the best pair of boots you could possibly ask for. There is obviously a catch, right? Healing schools, they're gonna want shield pins for outgoing, which is something you're just gonna have to balance. So there is a trade-off, right? Having an extra sword pin, you're giving up a shield pin. Are you willing to give up that extra resist to a school, or the outgoing if you're a healing school? That's a decision to be made, but the shad chance and the sword pins, it's a really cool combo. And finally, the actual creme de la creme drop from this raid, the wand, y'all. These wands absolutely go crazy. The gimmick of these wands is, though they give up pip conserve, they give shad chance, and the really crazy part is they give damage and pierce to 2 schools. And the wand that you're looking at is the Storm Death Wand. So if I were to put on, for example, instead of these life punishing pins, max death punishing pin, and then I also put on the corresponding, you know, pieces of Aeon gear that also give me, you know, like damage to death, then you're looking at not only a ton of damage, right? These aren't even maxed out pins. I could actually have 174 death damage, but also without a clockwork courser, I'm already at 30 pierce. So you're looking at 32 pierce for death. Now, I'll say this. Some of these wands are literally game changing. If you luck out and you happen to be a school where your Shabalba wand gives you extra damage and pierce to a higher DPP school, it is easily the best wand in the game. There is no question about it. Life is one of those lucky schools, but you can also use the same argument for Ice, because Ice gets Myth damage and pierce on their wand, and also Myth. Myth actually gets fire damage and pierce on their wand. And what's crazy about the way stats are going to be with the jewel audit, you might be able to create setups where you can have extra pierce jewels, and you can do even more pierce talents than you currently have. Right now, while I'm running a pair of boots that gives me a shield pin and without a clockwork courser, I'm already at 26 pierce. If I were to run an extra pin and also a clockwork courser, I'm at 31 pierce for Storm. And I could even give up a Pierce Jewel that I have for life and get even more Pierce for Storm. You could see Life's using Storm Gambits almost as naturally as any other Gambit that a Life would normally use. Now, obviously keep in mind, unlike a Storm, as a Life, you're capped at like 162 damage, you're capped at 40 Pierce, so you're not gonna be able to just completely dookie on someone compared to what a Storm can do. But it is really interesting to see that some schools have a wand that gives you Shad Chance and also extreme dual school ability. So this gear looks cool. It has a lot of applications, but in my opinion, there's one thing super holding it back that I really think they need to address. In previous raids, right? Let's say that I got like the Nullity one. Let's say that I happen to get this. And let's say that for some reason as a death, I didn't want that extra storm damage, right? I wanted to customize it and make it into maybe fire damage. All I would need is one copy of the storm damage version and I could just make a fire damage version. And yet right now with these wands, what you get is what you get. You actually like, let's say for example, right? The storm one, it gives death damage. Let's say that I don't want to take 500 damage every time I empower on a storm. I have no option of transmuting that into a wand that gives me secondary damage to life or myth as like the nullity set does. I think that holds this like entire set back massively. I think that's the one thing that I would do. Make it so we can transmutate all the gear, the rings, the Athames, and the wands from this raid to the secondary school of our choosing. And then you have a really cool set, super customizable, makes a big difference, allows dual schooling in a way that we just haven't seen before. All in all, this is definitely more of a PvP set. I will say this, I think if you are looking at the direction of the game, dual schooling and being able to do that is gonna help in, you know, raids as we go on. It's also probably gonna have more applications in PvE, so for that matter alone, you might want to do this for PvE, but I would have also liked if, you know, like the Nullity robe, for example, right? This is from the, you know, previous raid. This is clearly the best robe for PvE, right? You do this raid for the PvE robe. I wish they added that in the Crying Sky raid. It doesn't really seem like it has an equivalent, and I feel like that's another way that this gear somewhat misses the mark. Keep in mind, y'all, this gear will be able to be upgraded to 170 when Wallaroo drops, so having this gear is going to give you a massive leg up on other people, especially if it is as better compared to the Wallaroo gear as it is right now compared to Aeon gear. So definitely consider doing the raids. I would say at least for the cosmetics or at least for the experience, you should definitely do it. The gear is worth it. Though there are ways they could improve how worth it the gear is already worth it for many schools. The fact that it's this good with such an incomplete picture of its effect on the meta, since nobody has like, you know, full sets just lying around, that's kind of cool. And I think they did a pretty decent job with this raid, so that's my honest review. Pretty decent. A lot of y'all wanted me to make a video talking about the raid gear since, you know, we just beat the world's first raid, so here it is. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what y'all's thoughts and opinions are on this template, the gear template. I look forward to reading y'all's comments. As always, drop us a review, drop a like if you enjoyed, and if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong. Stay awesome. See y'all soon, and yeah.